Hi there, welcome back to the Dark Side Vlogcast. Jackson O'Keefe here once again for our final episode of the series. And what an episode we have in store for you today. So far we've introduced this idea of the dark side of arts and mental health, and we've looked at the historical context leading up to this subject. Well, we are now lucky enough to speak to Joanne Dickson, who is an Associate Professor of Psychology at ECU. Joanne's main focus of research falls within the area of mental health struggles from a motivational standpoint and the relationship to emotion. Joanne, thanks for being here. So I'll just get you first to kind of explain what your field of research is.
As you mentioned, my field is in mental health research. Specifically, most of my research has looked at struggles with depression, anxiety, and more recently with self-harm and well-being. And when I initially started this research, it was actually many years ago with my PhD, and I was aware that in terms of mental health issues and struggles, very little had looked at it from a motivational perspective, and yet motivation is just fundamental to everyday experience, and it helps us interpret and give frameworks for understanding our experience in life. And the other aspect that really appealed to me was motivation is just intimately intertwined with emotion. So how well we feel we're doing or not doing gives rise to a range of different emotions. And what we've found is that those different emotions are then linked with different mental health struggles. So that sort of course of research has been my trajectory, really.
So Joanne, a lot of what we're discussing in this vlogcast is the dark side, and the dark side of one's mentality, and specifically how that relates to the arts, be it visual arts or performing arts. So what I was wondering is, and you speak of mental illness and motivation, I seem to find that the arts requires motivation. Not only does it require motivation, but it can inspire it. It can inspire motivation, especially when the person, the artist, is passionate about what they're doing. So does that passion and that motivation work to kind of ease their mental health struggles, whether they know it or not?
It's a really interesting question. I think it could go either way, but in terms of the benefits of it, that self-expression of the artist and being able to externalise their emotions, I think on the whole, we'd say is really beneficial in terms of that self-regulation, because emotional self-regulation, because they're able to identify it, even though it's not in the form of words, it's probably more complex actually, and express it in another unique way. It's beneficial too, in the sense, I think, probably in putting it out there, it also, it promotes a lot of sort of things like self-discovery, appreciation, awareness. But where it can be, you know, when I talked about motivation, we have two types of motivation. One is around approach motivation, which is pursuing those sort of desirable, pleasurable outcomes. And the other is around what we refer to as avoidance motivation, sort of threatening scenarios, intimidating scenarios. I think the artist is actually quite, sets a model in a way of being able to embrace those sort of emotions, whereas I think often we tend to avoid, you know, threatening scenarios, and that provides relief, whereas I think for the artist they model a way of embracing, engaging with those full range of emotions, for example, threat, fear. And in doing so, I think it's an interesting thing with art. I think it's probably one is the process itself and what that does for the artist. And again, it's very subjective and individualistic, but it may, for example, give relief and release different emotions, and it may, I know the work I've done with, say, self-harm, and I wonder if there's a bit of an analogy here, but with self-harm, one of the main reason we found when we did a sort of systematic review of all the literature was people were doing it to release the negative sort of emotions and the negative build-up. And in many ways they didn't want then help because it was seen as a positive thing. And I'm wondering if there's a bit of an analogy with art forms where it is that release and it has a beneficial effect.
Right, so it's that release but taking on the form of art.
Yes, yeah. So it's a safe way to do it. It's a safe way to externalise those sort of emotions. And I think then it also has the benefit for the person who observes the artwork, because like I said, you know, these are emotions such as threat and fear aren't necessarily emotions we want to engage, but I think through the arts we can observe these emotions, or however we interpret the emotions, in a safe place as well, which perhaps opens a door into our own experiences and emotional experience, and allows us to deal with them in a safe way. So I think it's beneficial for the artist, but also for the observer. When you look at motivation and emotional regulation, it's we see it theoretically on a continuum. So for example, the piece of beauty which can give a sense of joy and elation, the flip side of that, or if people feel that they're not making the progress they want, or at the rate they want, we talk about that discrepancy, that's often what gives rise then to a sense of depression, sadness, frustration. But again, I think for the artist, those sort of emotions can be captured and expressed.
That's right.
Yeah.
Now it's time to hear what the artists themselves have to say. So join me as I speak to a few of the many talented visual artists that we have here in WA.
I think it's really vital, actually. I think, and as I've gotten older, I've realised this more, but I think it's always been an essential part of my journey, a part of my life. I think even from a very young age, art was sort of like it was like an escape. It was an escape from reality. It was an escape from everyday life. It was an escape from, sometimes it was an escape from the good times, sometimes it was an escape from the bad times. So it was always there. And I think personally, I was always a very shy sort of kid and quite reserved. And I think art, it's given me a voice. I feel like it makes me visible, like sometimes, and I don't mean that in a way that I want to be the centre of attention or anything like that. I mean it in a way that it's allowed me to be able to overcome some of my own, perhaps social paralysis or things like that, it does that for me. It serves that purpose.
Sometimes when I start a piece, it's usually because I'm working on a piece towards an exhibition or a commission or something. And at first I'll put it off. And then it's really frustrating when I start. And then all of a sudden I realise I'm really enjoying that and sort of really getting into it. And like I'm in the art, whatever I'm making, and it's like whether it's a landscape, I can feel the earth and sort of like be there. But if you're making something to do with a moment, back in time that wasn't that happy, it actually gets it out there. So you're not, so you're dealing with it. Like I'm from the stolen generation, so we were taken from our parents and told that they didn't love us, and we weren't worthy of love, and we were all going to hell, like we were little kids, like 5, 6, and we were getting told this sort of stuff, and it was really awful. And we didn't have toys or nice things, so we used to make our own. And so I've got some little sardine tins, sort of remade what we used to make as kids, like something that would satisfy our need for love or to give love. So it was something positive that from a negative situation.
I think a lot of the work that I do is super repetitive, So you do kind of get into a state almost like meditation. When I'm making the work, it's pretty labor intensive, and often I'm kind of getting into the zone for hours at a time. And that focus that is required can really turn into almost like a state of Zen, I suppose, you know, where you're really finally focused into that one. And quite often they're pretty fiddly little bits and pieces that I might be gluing together or stitching or so you do tend to practice a bit of mindfulness, I suppose, when you're making work like that.
I think when I'm creating a body of work for an exhibition, it's probably different than if I'm creating work for a wall or doing a sketch in my sketchbook. So there's different levels to all of these things. So for example, with creating a body of work for an exhibition, it's a bit of a roller coaster. So there are ups and there are downs. It's like running a marathon. You get to points where you think you can't go on, you can't do it, you have self-doubt, you have all of these things. But I understand that now. I understand that's part of the process, and process is very important for me. But creating a sketch or creating an idea or doing something in my sketchbook, for example, a lot of the time that's again process, but it's processing how I see the world, how I perceive the world, what I think of it, how it affects me, and that interchange is all it's all very interesting. It's all food for thought, but it's also very helpful. It's almost art therapy in a lot of ways, because I can read something or see something or experience something or be triggered by something, and any of these things that happen to me happen, and I'm forever grateful for this, obviously, that I have this life where I'm extremely fortunate and I get to process it in a way that not a lot of other people do.
For me, I enjoy my work, of course, and my work is part of what I do. And it kind of feeds into a sense of joy and a sense of intrigue and curiosity. But kind of on the other side of that, even though it helps with a sense of creativity, which is really good for mental health and development throughout the years to keep yourself invested in something, but sometimes that investment can kind of go to quite an extreme length where it'll be that thing where I really enjoy this, so I'm going to subject myself to 48 hours straight of sewing work and stuff, or going to extreme lengths to kind of get things done and organized, not because I've got deadlines, but because I'm willing to kind of put myself through that to see how far I can push it. The themes that I look at, because I grew up on a farm and I experienced a lot of home slaughters. We had to do shootings to kind of maintain the crops, maintain livestock, so there was no overgrazing and everything. So I got quite accustomed to seeing a lot of brutality in a very kind of utilitarian kind of way. So then even with a lot of the research that I look at, it's very interesting, looking at anatomical lithographs, looking at crime scene photos from the 30s and 40s, looking at body dysmorphias and diseases, especially in the Edwardian Victorian era, where people were just rampant with things like syphilis and tinea all over the face, which is quite gross to a lot of people, but there's a part of my brain where I'm yes, this is what I'm looking for, which then kind of feeds into my fashion work, which is a bit strange. But again, it's that weird thing where I enjoy it in a very weird kind of twisted way.
I think showing and communicating is it's an important essence in life. You've got to feel loved. So I guess that's a bit of an expression. Like if you can express yourself and you get feedback for it, that's a way of feeling loved in a way. So I think everyone needs to feel secure, needs to feel loved, and needs to have a sense of creating a sanctity, like a place of something bigger than themselves. And I think art can kind of fit into all them. It depends what you're communicating, but I think in a way of expressing it, that kind of fits in a lot of those essential things of humans, what humans need. I guess everyone has a dark side and a light side as well, don't they? So for me, I think I have 4 works in there. 3 of them are car crash kind of drawings, paintings, and one of them is a video. From the point of view of the paintings and the drawings of the car crashes, you know, it's a bit of a spectacle. You know, people have always liked watching those kind of things. You know, people slow down to try and have a gander at a car crash or something like that, just to see what's happening. And, you know, people love watching fights. And just today I was happened to be watching a little bit of a boxing match, and my wife walked past and said, "What are you watching that for?" And I'm like, you know, you can't enjoy watching 2 blokes trying to bash each other's brains out. You know, boxing, you know, professional sport, but you know, it's that spectacle, isn't it, where there's a little bit of a dark side in everyone where we want to see that, and for some reason, I'm not sure why, this kind of attraction to destruction. But what I hope from my artwork is that in that dark side, in that place where there's things going wrong, it points to a moment of hope as well. It's not concentrating on the negative side and not concentrating on the dark side, but in the dark side, you see the light side.
There you have it, and a big thank you to those artists for taking the time to share their thoughts. Well, that brings this 3-part series to a close. Thank you so much for watching. I hope, like me, you learnt a lot and feel inspired to get in touch with your artistic side and perhaps even embrace the darkness within you. Again, I highly encourage you to get along to the Dark Side exhibition. That will run from the 27th of May through until late June, and you can find it at ECU and There Is in Northbridge. See you later.